Welcome to College Smart Radio, helping you understand the true cost of college and tackle the runaway costs of financing a college education. College Smart Radio is hosted by Beatrice Schultz, a certified financial planner and founder of Westface College Planning. Now, here's your host for College Smart Radio, Beatrice Schultz.
Standardized testing is a fact of life for college-bound high school students. A good SAT or ACT tutor can have a profound influence on a successfully improved score. But there are also many other great resources available to families that can either complement the efforts of a tutor or substitute for them. On today's College Smart Radio program, we're going to be discussing resources that are readily available to help your student prepare for these tests. Hi, I'm Beatrice Schultz. Welcome to our weekly show, College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of a college education. Our show is about bringing up-to-date and practical advice to parents who are dealing with the cost of a college education for their kids. With some private schools costing over $60,000 a year, a UC costing close to $35,000, and a California State University running $25,000, parents need more help than ever. We bring you that help by sharing ways to pay less, tapping into financial aid, and prioritizing your source of funds to make sure you get through the most expensive years of your life. Based on my own education and experience, I share my insights with you week in and week out. I'm a certified financial planner and the owner of the San Carlos-based college planning business, Westface College Planning. I host educational workshops on college planning and consult with parents on a daily basis. And I bring in experts in many areas of the college process. From counselors, financial aid officers, student coaches, parents, and even students, you'll learn firsthand the ins and outs of how to pay for college and survive financially. In addition to our show, you can find lots of powerful information at our website, collegesmartradio.com. We have many articles with up-to-date information on navigating the waters of paying for the runaway costs of college. We have a monthly e-newsletter full of content about college planning. We also have posted a glossary of key terms used in the world of college planning, terms like total cost of attendance, FAFSA, net price calculator, and so forth. And we have a link to our free community parent workshops and webinars that I host to teach parents about how to pay for college and how the financial aid system really works. Let's get started on today's show. My guest on today's College Smart Radio show is Kreigh Knerr. Kreigh is an international educational consultant who specializes in critical thinking literacy and standardized test performance, like the ACT and SAT. He successfully worked with students all over the world and consults nationwide on test prep and text anxiety. In 2012, he invented QuoteEd, a mobile app used by thousands of schools and individuals throughout the world to improve SAT and ACT reading comprehension and test scores. Kreigh is joining us via phone from Wisconsin today. Hi, Kreigh. Welcome to College Smart Radio.
Hi, Beatrice. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So for those in our audience who aren't familiar, let's start the conversation with what exactly are ACT and SAT tests?
Yeah, the ACT is a test coming out of the Midwest, and the SAT is a test coming out of the East Coast, basically. But they're two different measures of college readiness, basically. So colleges will use those two tests. You sit down on a Saturday or a Monday if you have a religious reason not to take it on the Saturday, and it's about a 4-hour process. And so schools will take that and kind of use it to look at your GPA and see how they correlate. In terms of saying, do we want this student at our school? Do they have all the checks and dots and all those things?
So how does the ACT and SAT prep factor into admission decisions?
Sure. It's always difficult to say, but schools, and everyone says, oh, well, they're considering it less and less, but schools tend to weight them still, let's say, about 25% of your admissions package. But more importantly, financial aid tends to be very dependent upon your ACT and SAT score.
And that's a big deal when you're talking about financial aid. You're talking the availability of merit scholarships based simply on test scores or on proof of high academic standard.
Exactly. It's basically GPA and ACT score, and that's probably about 90% of the merit aid out there. Unless you're like an opera singer and they give you a vocal scholarship, but even those are sometimes based partly on GPA and ACT score or SAT score still.
So do you have any data on kind of how an improved ACT or SAT score might how much money a family might be able to get, a student might get more by having a higher score?
Absolutely, and it's a little bit crazy. Some schools will put it right on their website. Edgewood College in Madison, Wisconsin, I know, does it, and there are other schools that do as well.
I think University of Montana does it also.
Right.
Yep.
And most don't show you their list, but they have it.
Yep.
They just don't show it to you. But it can be as much as $2,000 to $4,000 a year, just 1 point on your ACT, or 30 points on your SAT.
So is 1 point on your ACT and 30 points on your SAT, is it attainable to improve your score that much?
Absolutely. And it's interesting. 55% of the population does improve the second time they take it. But I always recommend for students the first time they take it to try to take a practice test in real time, but not one that's actually going to get reported. And the only reason I say that, and there aren't too many schools that do this, but there are a couple schools that will actually average your scores when they're considering your financial aid, which stinks if you often jump 4, 6, or 10 points, and then they're averaging your scores.
Absolutely, yeah.
And for a number of students, a 1 point increase is really attainable. And actually, when you take the ACT, for example, whenever you take it, there's a standard deviation of 3 points. So if you were to take it 10 times, for example, and let's say the first time you took it you had a 24, your range should be somewhere between a 24 and 26, or a 23 to 25 if you were to take it 10 times. Those would be the scores you would get, again, without any preparation or further study.
So how often would you recommend people take them?
It depends on the student, but generally speaking, 3 times is enough. If you're applying to an elite university like a Harvard or an MIT, they don't want to see you taking it really more than 3 times, and they prefer if it was just once or twice. If you're applying to a state school, though, some schools actually like to see that you've taken it a lot of times because you really want to get in. So let's say that you're a fringe candidate. If they've seen that you keep taking the test because you really, really want to get in and want to improve that score, they'll consider that determination actually as much as the score in your application package.
Wow. Well, and that's good to know, because oftentimes those kids that are trying to get into the state school are not the same ones that are trying to strive to get to the Ivy League. So it's good that it's so true that every student has their own strategy to get into the colleges that they're interested in.
Absolutely.
So what about the strategy about, do I take the ACT, the SAT, or both?
And this is the question that I get asked probably more often than any other. And it's a little bit difficult, but what you want to do is base it on your individual student. And I'm speaking in generalities here, so again, make it very specific to your student. But the easiest way to kind of check is, one, to take the PSAT even as a sophomore. And if your school offers it, and some do and some don't, but the ACT has a test called the PLAN test, which is kind of like a pre-ACT. You
don't hear about it as much as the PSAT.
Correct. The big reason that the PSAT is talked about so much is that it's the National Merit Qualifying Exam when you're a junior. But as a sophomore, you can take it and kind of get an idea of where you're scoring. In terms of the ACT, though, you could take that at the end of your sophomore year. And colleges actually can't take that one as one of your admissions ones. So you can just kind of take it, and that one would be a free one that they wouldn't be able to average for your financial aid. And then you can kind of look at the scores and then think of how your student likes to process. The ACT, it just goes boom, boom, boom from the English section or grammar, and then math, and then reading, and then science. But it's a really, really fast test. It's really predicated on speed reading, if nothing else. Whereas the SAT kind of flips back and forth. There are going to be 3 reading sections, 3 math sections, and 2 grammar sections, plus a writing sample. And so the SAT is a little bit longer of a test, but if you like to kind of process things and you like puzzles, then the SAT tends to be a little bit better. The SAT tests more vocab, whereas the ACT isn't as vocab intensive. And so those are the kind of things you think about your child, say, all right, does my child like to think through things? Are they a slower reader, or are they a really fast reader and they want to get done? Because you can study vocabulary for the SAT. It makes up 30 to 50% of the reading score. But it's pretty easy to get, a vocab list and really sit down and say, okay, I'm going to do 20 words a week. Particularly if you start as a sophomore, you can do this as a junior, or even, as a senior, you can sometimes get away with that. And so it's kind of nice to know, all right, the SAT is going to be a little bit more process-oriented. If I study for it, I'll be able to pick out their themes. Whereas the ACT, with it being so fast, you're going to be able to pick out certain themes, from like the grammar section, for example, but it's going to be a little bit trickier with the ACT just because of the speed factor. But there's also one other difference, which I should mention. The SAT penalizes you if you guess and you miss. You lose 1/4 of a point, which isn't that significant, but you do lose, a little bit from that. But the ACT actually, it's either you get the point or you don't. And so they don't subtract even more points if you miss one. And for some students, the idea of, if I miss it, I'm going to lose a little bit, kind of freaks them out. And so it's helpful to know if your student's going to be able to handle that as well.
So if a student does both, because they're not sure, and now they have a mark of 1,800 on the SAT and 25 on the ACT, where do they go to say, well, which one's going to be rated better at the schools that I'm looking at? Or which one should I redo, I guess?
Sure. Well, there's two sides to this one. One is that for some schools, if you take the ACT, you don't have to take the SAT-2 subject test. So if you're not taking any AP courses or you don't think that you'd be strong on those subject tests, then you might kind of lean towards the ACT. Otherwise, if that's not a consideration, you can pretty much make it a coin toss and say, all right, which test did I like better? And that's really a good way of going about saying, all right, did I like, the idea of kind of going back and forth between sections like the SAT does, or did I like just being done with a section when I was done with it, like the ACT does?
If you've just joined us, my guest on today's College Smart Radio show is Kreigh Knerr. He's an international education consultant who specializes in critical thinking, literacy, and standardized test performance. And he's also the founder of QuoteEd, which is a mobile app line, which is used for students to improve their SAT and ACT reading comprehension and test scores. We'll be right back on College Smart Radio after a quick break.
For more information on today's topic, visit collegesmartradio.com. or call area code 650-587-1559. College Smart Radio continues in moments on AM 1220 KDOW. Contact Beatrice Schultz at collegesmartradio.com or call 650-587-1559. Now back to College Smart Radio with your host Beatrice Schultz on AM 1220 KDOW.
Welcome back to College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of college. I'm Beatrice Schultz. We all know that college is expensive and will most likely be some of the most costly years for a family. Understanding how to navigate the college smart costs is a smart thing to know. To help families be on this radio show, I host community workshops, live and via webinar, several times a month that explain the costs of various colleges, how the financial aid system works, and things to consider to prepare yourself for this tremendous expense. My next webinar will be on Wednesday, January 15th at 7 p.m., when I'll be hosting a FAFSA-specific workshop via webinar. To learn more and reserve your seat, go to my website at collegesmartradio.com. If you've just joined us, I've been talking with my guest, Kreigh Knerr, about ACT and SAT testing, or the importance of it, and also about the importance of the preparation. He's launched a mobile app line, QuoteEd, which we're going to talk about a little bit. But we were talking a little bit about the break, and I even introduced the show talking about kind of the cost or the importance of, do you need to get a tutor to improve your mark? And I want to talk about that and kind of ways that students can work to prep for the test. So I'm passing that on to you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And it's tricky because, people will pay as much in New York City as $15,000 to $20,000 just in test prep, which is absolutely astronomical. That's the cost of 1 year.
I've heard families will spend $50,000 when it all adds up to just to figure out how to get to the right $60,000 college.
Yeah. It's incredible. But there are a number of ways that you can approach it. And there's certainly good tutors available for less, but there are actually a lot of ways that for some students that you can actually do it without having to pay too much. And one of them is, and this is a pretty simple one, but let's say that you've got your SAT book, and I always recommend if you're studying, you get the book published by College Board. It's a big blue one for the SAT. Or if you're studying for the ACT, you get the big red book, again, published by them. You always want real resources because what happens is when a lot of companies make kind of generic versions, they aren't as good, and so then your prep time isn't worth the investment that you're putting into it. But one of the easiest ways you can get prep for free is when you go through one of those tests, if you don't know how to do a math problem or you can't understand why you missed a reading question, you can usually bring it to your classroom teachers, and they'll be happy to work through that problem with you, which is a great way of kind of getting some assistance for free.
So those books have the questions and also the answers available to you.
They do.
Yeah.
And the ACT book has explanations. The SAT does not. So that's kind of the difference, that the SAT, they just have the answers without explaining them, which can be helpful for some people, but sometimes on math, for example, it's kind of hard to figure out why you missed it.
Yeah.
But there are some really great resources out there, and a couple of them are for free. Obviously, there's the SAT question of the day and the ACT question of the day. Those are standard. Sign up for them. You can follow them on Twitter. They'll send it to you for free, and it's great. You just get a little daily practice. But if you want to kind of say, all right, what are some of the big themes, or how do I do some of these other things? A fun way as a family is to watch game shows. Like I always like to say, watch Jeopardy, because it gets you used to people asking questions, and it introduces you to new words, which is really helpful when you're trying to sift through the test. And I actually noticed, I was reading a blog written by someone who used to work for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and as he was talking about question writing for the show, it sounded identical to how they craft the questions and the answer choices on the ACT and SAT. So it's a lighthearted way of getting into that type of thinking, and it doesn't cost any money.
That's
as long as you have a TV.
A great recommendation of just making your lifestyle be a place of learning, which we all want to do, or we would all encourage for our families. That's good. I like that Jeopardy. And Kreigh did contribute a blog to our website, so anyone can go to the College Smart Radio website and they'll see this blog where he has some of the top free, or I guess 6 free things that you can do to help your student improve your SAT and ACT scores. So check that out on collegesmartradio.com. So tell me a little bit about how Quote Ed works and what it is.
Yeah, well, it's an app that I designed because I had all of these student athletes and performers. And they would always say, well, I didn't have my ACT or SAT book with me, and so I couldn't study. And so I kept doing research, and I came across a study out of Stanford University where they were talking about literacy and how studying intricate sentences at the beginning of class time for 10, 15 minutes was really accelerating students' reading comprehension. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then I got a smartphone, and I was like, I could use these and actually get my students used to the way the questions and answer choices go on the test too, all while using great literature to kind of introduce them to the different types of reading styles. And so my joke is that when you're taking the SAT or ACT, the ACT has 4 different sections: prose fiction, natural science, social science, and humanities. And the SAT has a similar mix, it just doesn't label them that way. That's a lot of different writing styles, and we don't usually come across all those in high school. And so what the app does is really gets them exposed to, in all 35 to 75 word quotations, those different types of writing. And the cool thing is that students have to be able to get engaged immediately. They don't have 100 words or even 800 words. They have to be able to figure out the core argument or the core theme of that quotation right away, so that when all of a sudden they've got a 200-word essay, they go to town. And so it's based on my own research in conjunction with that paper out of Stanford. And the really cool thing is that we've noticed that for SAT, our average improvement has been 70 points in the critical reading section. Which
equates to money in the world of financial aid and paying for this crazy cost of college.
Yep. And so that one's been really great to kind of see the results. I knew it was good before I built it, but you always want to get the data after to make certain that it's as effective as you think it is.
How have you been able to collect that data?
Part of it is from surveys from people that have used the app, and a little bit is as well, actually, my students that I work with all over the country will recommend it to their friends, and then they collect data from their friends. So it's been really nice to get. We've probably had, I'd say about 300 responses, which isn't too bad considering I have downloads from all over the world, and some of these people I never actually hear from. I'll also get an email from them saying, "Oh, thank you for updating to the latest Apple system. The app's awesome." So but how are you doing? So it's been nice to hear that. And then we did build one other app, which I never wanted to build it because I always joke that the ACT science section is not like real science. My old joke goes that and I'm going to use an old SAT analogy to describe the ACT science section, so hopefully everyone can bear with me. But the ACT science section is to real science what a veggie burger is to a hamburger. And I like veggie burgers. I mean, I really like black bean burgers.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as a hamburger.
Right.
And so we built an ACT science app because it was a section that freaked everyone out. And actually, if you look at test scores from like New England and really the East Coast, where they're more SAT heavy, they'll do great on the reading section, the math section, and the writing section, and then their science section is actually usually their lowest, which everywhere else in the country is often higher because they're used to the test. And the reason for it is no one's used to the ACT science section because it's just so foreign. And so we ended up building that app mostly because our users kept begging us to. And the nice thing about that one, whereas the reading one is great because it gets you used to the reading and it'll improve your reading comprehension even for college, the ACT Science app even has the very tricks that I teach my students to say, all right, here's how you navigate this crazy diagram, this crazy graph, this crazy table, and how you do it quickly enough to actually get through that science section.
So do you have a quote ed app, or in both of these apps, I guess, for every smartphone as well as every tablet that's out there today? I mean, and can you also do it on your computer, or how does that, what's the availability?
Yep, they're available on Android and Apple products.
Okay.
So I don't have them for the Windows Phone or the BlackBerry.
Okay.
But so they cover most of the students. And they're available, they're actually optimized for both tablet and for cell phone, because what we discovered was that schools were downloading both apps en masse, and they weren't even optimized for it. And I said there, I'm like, well, this looks, not right on the tablet. So we actually just got the final update on the reading comprehension app because the schools just kept downloading it. They wanted to use it in classrooms to get their students ready for the SAT and ACT.
Well, I think that's very valuable. I would think that some people would want to look at a bigger screen when they're testing it, but I love the idea that it's mobile, so you can be literally the 10 minutes before your class starts, if you're allowed to have a cell phone in your classroom, have that available.
And they're actually designed, and this is the one nice thing, they're designed to work within the smartphone, so that the screen size is actually perfect for what it delivers.
It's manageable, and those young kids can still see on those small screens.
Right. Because that was one thing I noticed when I was looking at the apps that were out there. They were like, oh, read this 200-page passage on your phone. I'm like, well, how am I going to be able to read the passage and actually answer the questions? And, like, you're opening screens and closing screens, and it doesn't make sense. And so this one's designed organically to work so it's all on the screen, and there's very little scrolling, which is nice.
So we've just got about a minute left to go. Are there any other, so Quote Ed is available. You can download it from, from any of the app stores or the Play Store for the Android. And I'll have a link to that on my website. So what's kind of any final recommendations for a resource that people can use to kind of prepare themselves? Sure.
The Critical Reader and Pwn the SAT are two great resources. They have free stuff on their websites, and they've written excellent books, absolutely excellent books. And beyond that, if you're trying to figure out what it's like to study with your student for the SAT, there's a book coming out by Debbie Steer called The Perfect Score Project, which I actually got an advanced copy of. It's a hilarious read, and it tells you like how to write an essay on the SAT and all those little tidbits about what is this crazy thing called the SAT. And so that one's a really fun book. It comes out in February. So you might want that one as well.
Wonderful. I will have a link to that website to that book when it comes out. And thanks so much for joining us today, Kreigh, on College Smart Radio.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, that wraps up another weekly show of College Smart Radio. We hope you picked up some information today that helps you figure out ways to manage the runaway costs of college. You can hear us each week here on KDOW 1220 AM, Saturdays at 3 p.m. We promise to bring you up-to-date information from the front lines of helping parents deal with the most expensive years of their lives. This is Beatrice Schultz. Thanks for tuning in to College Smart Radio. We look forward to sharing more helpful information with you next week.
You've been listening to College Smart Radio. with certified financial planner Beatrice Schultz. If you have questions on today's topic, log on to collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. That's 650-587-1559. And join us next week at this time for another edition of College Smart Radio on AM 1220 KDOW.